This is the Straight Truth Podcast, biblical answers to difficult questions from a Christian worldview. Welcome again to the Straight Truth Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Philpot. I'm joined by Pastor Richard Caldwell of Founders Baptist Church. This is episode number 332. And Pastor, today I'd like to discuss contentment with you. I think this is an important topic, one that we should bring up really regularly. It's been a few years since we've done this. And it's a good reminder for people, no matter what they're going through, whatever their present circumstances are in various spheres of their life, it's good to remind oneself to be content in all circumstances. So what I want to do is to really, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got 5 spheres of life where I would love to just give each one of these to you and then just hear you kind of bounce off that or whatever text comes to your mind about how a Christian would think about being content in that specific circumstance. The first sphere I want to discuss is the sphere of the home life. So how would you encourage, exhort a Christian who is dealing with contentment in the home? So let's think specifically or firstly with the marriage.
We always begin with what we know to be right in the sight of God, and everything else then has to flow out of a commitment, a devotion to that. So we know that God's will for marriage, for example, one man, one woman for a lifetime, that's marriage. And so the day that I married my wife, that settled that issue. And there's no question about whether I'm going to be married to her or not. The only question is, am I going to trust the Lord through the years that we're together so that I'm honoring him and loving her in the way that I should. But whether I'm in that relationship or not was settled as a believer, was settled the day that I entered into it. And so I always, in any realm where we're having, contentment issues, I think you've got to ask, what are the road markers? What are the concreted in sort of parameters for this relationship, and I've got to be fully devoted to those things. So one of the mistakes that people make when it comes to contentment in marriage is they leave a door open in their mind to whether this relationship is going to be permanent or not.
I thought about that too.
And so they, as soon as you leave a door open that has no business being open in your head, well, did I marry the right person? Am I really happy in this? Is there some other happier place for me than in this relationship? You have already disobeyed the Lord in your thinking because that was settled the day you got married. I've joked with people before, once you get married, you can be happy together or you can be miserable together, but either way, you're going to be together. And so that's how I have to think about it. Like, Lord, how can I make my marriage better by following you, by obeying you? That kind of contentment, and this is what I'm about to say will extend to every realm you want to talk about, but we're beginning with the home. That kind of contentment is found in my relationship with God. Well, if I do that, Pastor Richard, if I settle in my mind, I'm in this relationship, no matter what, this is a lifetime relationship, I'm miserable right now. I mean, this is unhappy for me. I don't want to think about this for a lifetime. So where will I find contentment? There. Answer, in God. You find it in your relationship with God, in your obedience to God, in what he supplies in your heart that no human being could ever supply. You find it in the place of worship. So contentment is found in the place of worship. I will worship God here, right here. And so talking about marriage, in this relationship, I will worship God. I'm thinking about Hebrews 13, verse 5, where it says, make sure that your character is free from the love of money. So there we're talking about someone discontent because they're wanting money. How would I make sure that my character is free from the love of money? Next statement, being content with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. So that we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? So one of the reasons that people chase money is it represents a stronghold in their mind. It's a fortress. It's a place of safety. They feel insecure if they don't have it. Well, God has promised to be your helper. You don't have to have money to be safe. He is your safety. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Well, in the very same way, we can apply that to marriage. What do I have if I don't have the happiest marriage on the face of the earth? I have the Lord.
Yeah, right.
And He's
That's
there,
good.
and He's with me, and He's enough.
That's great.
And whatever difficulties I'll face in the realm of marriage, He will be there to help me through them. He will give me the grace that I need and the mercies that I need to endure those things. So the way you live by the guideposts in marriage, that you're committed to the things that are set forth in Scripture, these are non-negotiable. One man, one woman for life. I'm committed to this with all my heart. How do I have contentment if my marriage isn't the greatest? Answer, the Lord. He's enough for you. And so you've got to believe that and actually feed off of that. Like, I'm going to actually let my heart be satisfied by the presence and fellowship of God. I will worship Him right here in this place of this difficult marriage if someone has a difficult marriage.
Yeah, and by doing that, then you're not creating longing in your heart for something different.
Right.
So that's so important. I appreciate that. So on the home life, you mentioned income, because that's certainly addressed in the New Testament all over the place. I mean, Paul mentions it in Philippians, 1 Timothy. You mentioned Hebrews 13, just great places where the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. And so, with food and clothing we'll be content, right, is what he says. That's a really good exhortation. So what about, okay, that's in the realm of money, but what about just my job situation? Maybe it is because it doesn't pay enough, but maybe I just don't like it. How do I remain content in a situation like that?
To understand that to make changes is not sinful if I'm afforded that opportunity. But the real answer for any of us is not locational, it's devotional. So I'm thinking now about Paul's counsel to Christian slaves who might have the opportunity to attain their freedom. He said, if you have that opportunity, you're free to take it. But he was also counseling those slaves to a contentment, to a joy, to a worship right where they were. And I think this is something that we all battle with throughout our lives, is the idea that there's a place or a circumstance or a person or a possession that is somehow going to change my heart satisfaction. That if I could live in this particular place, if I could achieve this particular role in my company, if I could make this amount of money, if I could meet this person and be in this kind of marriage, then my heart would be totally satisfied. And the Scriptures teach us just the opposite of that, that no matter where you are, you can know heart satisfaction in God. And I have to believe that. So I just reflect on Paul's advice to those slaves. If you can do it, afford yourself the opportunity, but you don't have to. The same is true with my job. If I have an opportunity to change jobs in a God-honoring way, you can go do that. Nothing says you have to stay where you are. But if you think that just getting that new job is going to magically produce satisfaction, you'll find out that you were wrong. So sometimes the answer is not to change location; it's to change devotion. What am I worshiping the Lord here? Am I seeing this as an opportunity to serve Him, please Him, right here? And I can, no matter how difficult the job is. If I'm not appreciated, if others are treated better than I am, can I worship the Lord right there? You can. And in fact, you might find out you have a greater influence there than you would where you're more highly looked up to. I mean, when someone watches a person who has little influence serve like a king, so to speak, they're just happy and joyful and resting in the Lord. People recognize that. Like, what gives you joy every day? How do you come in here so happy? Rest of us are miserable. Why are you so joyful? You can have great influence when you learn to worship God right where you are. So sometimes it's not the greatest influence. Even would not be a change of location. It would be an adjustment in the realm of my devotion.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good, because that feels like those principles apply to all the spheres I have here. But let's think about dwelling place then, just the area in which you live, or maybe the area you grew up in. I grew up in Ohio, and I love Ohio, but having visited almost all the other states, and you go to Colorado, or you go to the West Coast, even California, it's just so beautiful there. You sometimes wonder, why did my ancestors stop? As they're going west, why did they stop in Ohio? Why didn't they just continue on? Because it's beautiful land. And sometimes people get it in their minds like, this isn't me. I'm a mountain person or whatever. I want to get out, here or there. I'm a coast person. I want to be at the beach, that kind of thing. And so I just hate this place. I'm not really content to stay here. What would you say anything to that person?
Yeah, just again, I think what we're struggling with in all these questions is our sinfulness, which has a deceptive power about it. And so any time we begin to think that this earth under the curse is going to provide for us what only heaven is going to provide, then we're on the wrong track. And so wherever you go in the world, it's somebody's home, right? Mm-hmm. So my wife likes to watch, and I do too, shows that originate from England and Scotland, and you see those landscapes, and they're so beautiful. And so my temptation has never been, I want to live in Colorado. I want to live in Scotland. I want to live. But if you go there, someone already lives there. Like that's their home. Mm-hmm. And you're going to find discontented people there.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. You're going to find people who living in Scotland who wish they could come to America,
right?
Who wish they could come to Houston, Texas, right? Mm-hmm. So wherever you go in the world, there are discontented people. What does that tell you? That contentment is not found in that location. That's not the key or the secret to contentment. And you even can experience this on a personal level when you're in some beautiful place by yourself, and all you can think about is, man, I wish my wife was here to talk to her about this, or I wish my kids were here.
Kind of discontent.
It's a kind of discontentment, isn't it? So it's a clue that relationships are more important than places. If you're in some beautiful location and you wish your wife was there, guess what? It's because you think that she's more important than that place. That place doesn't ultimately satisfy your heart.
Yep.
And so when you're in a place and God has blessed you with your family, with your church family that loves you and you love them, and you know them and they know you, a place where you're well taught and well cared for, why would you long for any other place on the face of the earth?
Yeah.
Why would you? But even beyond that, just places don't satisfy us. Our satisfaction is found in God. People ultimately don't satisfy us. Yeah, I'm thankful. I have a wonderful marriage. I wouldn't trade how kind God has been to me in that realm for anything. But if I try to find my ultimate satisfaction in my wife, I'm on the wrong track. I best love her, best appreciate her, best enjoy her when I do those things in a secondary fashion, after my devotion to Christ, after my love and worship to God. Now, out of that satisfaction of heart, I'm actually able to love her better. That if I'm somehow focused on her as an idol, trying to find my satisfaction in her, heart satisfaction is never found in the place of idolatry. It's always found in the place of worship of the true God. Yeah. So if we're talking about money becoming my idol, or a place becoming my idol, or a person becoming my idol, or a position becoming my idol. At every one of those points, I'm an idolater, and there's no contentment found in sin. There's no contentment, and idolatry is sin. There's no contentment found in sin. So it's only as I learn to worship God rightly, I'm to love Him with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. He's to be my all in all. Christ's preeminence in everything. When He ceases to be preeminent in my life, my discontentment shows it. So actually, discontentment is a clue to check up on your devotion. Am I worshiping God right now as I should be? Because my heart is saying I'm not. Something's out of order. Right. I might not even be able to discern what it is, but that discontentment is a real clue to me to reorient myself with respect to worship.
Yeah, it's interesting that contentment always seems to be contrasted with, you mentioned idolatry, I was thinking of covetousness. That's so interesting how there seems to be a contrast there. So, but you're saying, the God and satisfaction in Him is the conduit through which we find great contentment in these.
Yeah, it's an interesting connection you make, because covetousness is identified as idolatry.
Yeah, right.
In Scripture. So discontentment, I want something else, covetousness, and yet that's equated to idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
So is God, make sure your character's free from the love of money, being content with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. I am enough for you, is what our God is saying to us. And so in all these realms we're talking about, is he enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is he enough for your marriage
Mm-hmm.
to be a place of contentment for you? Is he enough for your role in life to be a place of contentment for you? How many people, Josh, are longing to be something in life or to achieve something in life that they never have and never will?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was your life ruined? You spent your whole life in pursuit of something and you didn't get there. What were you pursuing? And ultimately, if what we're not pursuing is the Lord and just pleasing him, just being faithful to him, no matter what that looks like, then we're going to find ourselves misguided.
Yeah. That gets to, another area I was thinking of is contentment in one's ability or talent or gifting. A lot of people think they're pastors in their head. I mean, we've even listened to somebody say that I am an elder without ever meeting those qualifications and kind of feeling like they are in this position to appoint themselves. And yet the Lord hadn't called that person to that, and at least not at this time. And so how does one find, contentment in my makeup as a human being and the gifting that God has given me?
It's a great question. Yeah, self-orientation. Again, we're going to go back again to the root of what we've been talking about, but
Sure.
it's self-orientation versus God orientation. If I exist for God and his glory, then he has the right to give me whatever gifting he chooses to. He has the right to define and to dictate where that gifting will be used. He has the right to define and dictate the results of my efforts. So what I'm given to do, where I'm given to do it, how I'm given to do it, and what the result will be, all that is his to determine. And if my orientation is right, Godward, I'm pleased with that. Like, I couldn't want anything else than that. Lord, whatever you want is what should be, and I rejoice in it and find my satisfaction in that. If it's a selfward orientation, all of that gets skewed. I will determine what I think I'm gifted to do. I have the right to determine where I think I'm going to do it. I have a certain set of expectations about what it should look like after I do it, what the result should be, or else I'm not going to be happy. And ultimately, it's all about me. And so one of the reason why people end up wasting so much time trying to say there's something they're not, or being unhappy with what they actually are, is they're focused on themselves. They're not focused on the Lord. It's not really about God. As much as they take God into their mouth, he's on their lips, their heart is far from him. And what's really at the center of their heart is themselves. And it's also just such a wrong-headed view of what's going to matter in eternity. We've joked about it.
Right.
There's no pastor section in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So are we really going to care in the eternal day, standing before our Savior as brethren, the inheritance we enjoy in the company of the saints, right, among the saints, an everlasting world of fellowship and love, relationship? Are we going to care what role God assigned to us on this earth? We're not going to care at all, other than that we were faithful with it. So when we invest too much sense of significance in what role we play right here on earth, again, it's cluing us in on, I'm not living with eternity in view. If I have eternity in view, then Lord, whatever you want me to do, if I'm a doorman in your house, it's better than I deserve, and I'm grateful to get to do it. Mm-hmm. That actually allows us to serve well from an earthly point of view, roles with higher significance. So if God does assign to you some place of responsibility that involves leading others, shepherding others, guiding others, you do that with humility, because it's not like you chased that role, right? You were content with whatever God would give to you. So now you're actually in a better position to manage that role well in humility versus someone who has had aspirations that are self-driven. Now you end up in that role. How are you going to navigate that? How are you going to adjudicate that? Not well, because it's about you.
Yeah.
not about God, not about others.
Yeah. And so lastly, we shouldn't end this without mentioning contentment with church. There are many that will say, I have friends at this church, it's hard to make relationships here. I'm going to go to another church, it's going to be better over there than it is right here. I'm just not content with our situation. I might even love the pastor. I love the pastor. Preaching's great here. But I'm just not content with the church, culture, that kind of thing.
Yeah, misunderstanding of the church, for one. So you look at those New Testament churches, they all had problems. So the idea that I'm going to find the perfect church, wrong-headed, not true. Thinking, as we've talked about with respect to jobs or where I'm going to live, thinking that the issue's primarily locational instead of devotional.
Mm-hmm.
There's something you can learn right there at that church where maybe you don't feel like you have the greatest number of friends. Is there something you can learn there? Can you make an investment in other people toward, for example, a church being friendlier than it is right now? Like, could you be a game changer there? Could you make an investment that would actually help the church be better in that area? Do you even think in those terms?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you just think, I'm just going to relocate because it's not as friendly as I want it to be?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a misunderstanding of what friendliness would mean or what fellowship would mean. I really believe there are some people who think that they ought to be in somebody else's house 2 or 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah, that's unrealistic.
Go home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, learn to love your family.
Exactly.
So sometimes our views of fellowship are even informed by discontentment at home. Maybe I'm not very happy at home, so I want to be in someone else's house, 3 or 4 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
when really I need to learn to love my wife and love my children, or love my husband and love my children if it's a woman struggling with that. So I think churches have hurt people this way. Like we have so hyper-organized ministry that you end up with something going on at the church every day of the week, and people don't just go live it. Like I've joked before, women at the church 4 nights a week learning how to be homemakers. I mean, at some point you have to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Josh, what I would encourage everyone about is if your church is solid doctrinally, if you have qualified elders, if it is otherwise faithful, and you feel like you're not having enough fellowship there or friendship there, you just need to stay put and grow.
Mm.
Because what you might find is that church you go to that you think you have more friendship or fellowship or whatever may not be as healthy from a number of different points of view, the doctrine or the shepherding or whatever. What are you going to do then? Now you have your friends, but the church is unhealthy in all those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Which matters more to you? So I would say stay put and learn to love the Lord and serve the Lord right there. And eventually, it may be the church you've never loved a church better when it's all said and done, after you've stuck it out and allowed the Lord to mature you.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Straight Truth Podcast. Now, Straight Truth is listener supported. So if you'd like to find out ways how you can help us to continue to produce this podcast, you can go to our website and find out ways to do that, straighttruth.net. At that website, you'll also find links to all of our previous episodes and our social media channels, so be sure to check it out. Straight Truth is a production of Walking in Grace Ministries, the preaching and teaching ministry of Pastor Richard Caldwell. For more information, go to walkingingrace.org.